All right, we are back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us. Our guest with us this morning is Murfreesboro professor John Weil, MTSU professor actually, and he attended school at UVA and was very upset to see how things went down there, because that's where the protest really started over the past couple of days in Charlottesville. And we're talking this morning about, as you see on the screen, should historic monuments be moved and everything that goes along with it, because that's what comes down. You know, yesterday there was a gathering over here at the Capitol where they continue to bring up, you know, the idea of removing the bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest. Now that's on Capitol. You know, there's also a statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest on the interstate coming into Nashville. That's on private property, and the owner has every right to put that up there. So that's not what they're talking about. But they're talking about a bust like that. It usually comes down to these types of monuments on public property, right?
It does. And again, we read different things. You know, some people say, well, he was a prominent Tennessean, he was a brilliant tactician. Others say he founded the Ku Klux Klan. You know, can't we find somebody better to represent Tennessee? And the answer, in my judgment, is yes, we probably can. Yeah,
even the governor is on board with that, but it has not been removed yet. They still continue to talk about it. But let's take some calls. Let's go to Reverend Fuzz. Reverend Fuzz, good morning.
Hey, Nick.
Hi, Reverend. How are you?
You know, this morning I'm going to be meeting with the developer of Fort Negley Greer Stadium. He wants to get community sentiment about what's out there. So I don't know if your guests are familiar with Fort Negley. I've had some strong feelings about that, because that's a place where during the Civil War, black soldiers joined the Union Army and effectively fortified Nashville and won that war. So I hear guests saying, and you too saying, things like, somebody like a Nathan Bedford Forrest or some of these heroes, they're from the Confederate side. The good stuff that they did and why people are celebrating their heritage. Well, let's say that I go and I rob the bank, and in the process I kill somebody while I'm robbing that bank. I leave the bank and there's a building on fire across the street. I drop the money and I go and save people's lives in that building. Do I not go to jail?
Right.
And I saw the protests in Charlotte, and my first thought was that back in '87 I picked up the phone and called the Ku Klux Klan and arranged a meeting. Because I remembered that nobody is talking to each other, like your guest said. We're all yelling at one another and screaming and calling people repugnant, which I think is wrong, to call someone repugnant. People are what they learn. Let's teach them a better way, no matter who they are. That's what I kind of think. I know that's idealistic sounding, but we do say that people are the total of their experiences. I have a guy in my church who, a white friend, wanted him to go to Mississippi to meet his parents because he found out that Negroes didn't have tails, and he wanted to show his parents that. That's what that guy had been taught. He met another experience and he learned something different. I want to ask this professor, can these people, and all people, can we learn something different?
Good question, Reverend. Thank you. Can they? And maybe the better question is, are they willing to?
I think the second is a harder question to answer.
Yeah. Because I think they can learn.
Our republic is founded on the, you know, universities, churches are founded on the principle that through intellect and through spiritual development we can change, and you know, there are great examples of people in history, you know, who have turned a new leaf, and as he say, have gone from a life to crime to a life of helping others. But you know, our history is it's longer than it used to be, and it's quite complicated.
Yeah, as I see the anger and the divisiveness there, I don't think anyone can get to the point where they calmly sit down and talk to each other, at least in that type of setting. You know, it's just. But I hear what the Reverend's saying, and I like his sentiment. But we keep talking about it, and it doesn't happen, in spite of efforts from people like Reverend Fuzz.
Again, the one thing that the demonstrators who started this would want us to believe is that that things are getting worse, that racial antagonism is greater than it ever was before, and I don't think that's the case. We have some groups that are temporarily more emboldened than they have been in the past, but we've made, you know, people are no longer relegated to the back of the bus or to a different lunch counter. We have made tremendous strides, and you know, I think it's important to keep in mind what we have done, where we have come, and we haven't arrived there yet, but we're a lot closer to Dr. King's dream now than we were in 1963.
All right, let's go to Joe. Joe, good morning.
Good morning, Nick.
Hi, Joe.
I'm just listening to your, Reverend Fuzz and the professor. It sounds like the professor is as confused about a lot of this stuff as I am.
Probably true.
I think most people need, it seems like a lot of these folks that are tearing these statues down, which makes no sense at all, that they're college students, most of them, or young people. I don't think they really need to go back and read history and find out what really happened, what caused the Civil War, which wasn't all slavery. There was other things involved too. And some of the people is involved in the Civil War, and how to solve anything, you got to go back sometimes and to the very beginning and see how all of this stuff got started. How slavery got started, how the slaves got here, and go from there and follow it on through what happened. If you study history a little bit, the National Cemetery is built on a farm that belonged to Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee was married into the family of George Washington.
He was.
Yeah, he's talking about Arlington Cemetery, right? And you can go up there, and there's this spectacular home at the top there now. And I just had visions of Robert E. Lee sitting up there, rocking and looking out over everything. But he's correct, yeah.
You know, I just have a book coming out in the next month or two on Civil War and Reconstruction, and basically I'm trying to look at some of the documents. And it is a complicated history, but one of the most fascinating documents is called the Cornerstone Speech, and it is the Vice President of the Confederacy who says very clearly that the problem with the American founding was it was premised on a false premise. It was premised on the notion of human equality. We're going to create a state that's premised on inequality, premised on white racial supremacy. So one of the most prominent leaders of the Confederacy clearly stated that the purpose of the Confederacy was support of slavery. Now, there were other issues that naturally were involved, but the history is often more complicated than either side wants to acknowledge.
Yeah. Let's go next to Cindy. Hi, Cindy.
Good morning, Dick.
Good morning, Cindy.
Well, I know I'll make you mad, but anyway, like I've told you and I've told you before, that it wasn't about slavery for the Confederates. What it was about, it was about we wanted to keep the South, okay? We didn't want to be a part of the North. For the fact that we got shipped down here with nothing and built a bunch of little prairies, and that's the way we lived. We didn't want that. You know, we didn't want to be gone. So that's the way it went. But then they had the Union asked them to fight for that other Civil War, and you know what? The Confederates proudly did it. So they sure did. So please don't take Nathan Bedford Forrest down.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm not sure. I didn't get her point about the fact that they wanted to preserve. I understand the lifestyle here, but I think the lifestyle in the South was largely predicated on slavery, and so I think that you can't separate the two.
I mean, she has a point in that the North was industrializing.
Right.
Most people believe one of the reasons the South did not industrialize as fast was, in fact, because of the legacy of slavery.
Okay.
You know, they were dependent on slave labor in a way that many people believe suppressed the energies of not only of those who held in slavery, but also of the whites who said, well, the way to get ahead is not hard work on my own, is to go out and hire somebody else to try to do the work for me. So in a sense there, now it's true that there were northern merchants who helped bring in slaves into the United States. Nobody was guiltless, but the South was sort of stuck with the legacy of an institution that was not only immoral but outdated. And we still, to some degree, suffer the consequences.
Let's go next to Darlinda. Hi, Darlinda.
Yes.
Good morning. Go ahead.
Good morning. My only thing I got to say about removing those historical monuments, when you go over Germany and places like that, you don't see Nazi statues or monuments and the city squares and all. Now, I'm an African American. At first, I thought, well, it's part of history, let it go. But then thinking about it, after I heard this Holocaust victim survivor talking about how this reminds us back in the days of Poland and all that, when Hitler, took over Germany. Well, when the Holocaust, the whole thing happened. My thing is that you don't see those monuments in Germany, Poland, and stuff like that, the Nazis and all. You don't see it. They need to come down. It's time to come down. It's time to turn their page on history. It's time to let them go.
Thank you for your call. And I've heard that argument before, and I think there's some credence to it. I mean, she's right. I mean, here, like it or not, and we live here in the South, newsflash, lost. And they continue to, and all of us, and continue to bring it up in the history and cling to this. But do you think there's a parallel between what she's saying, Germany, Hitler, you don't see a statue of him. We talked about Saddam Hussein's torn down. So why do we have these statues of these leaders of a lost cause up around here?
Let's do something easier. Nazis have never done anything for the United States. We lost hundreds of thousands of lives in World War II fighting Nazism. Nazism is un-American. Nazism is built on premises that are directly contrary to our founding documents. That is not part of our history. And if someone if someone wants a Confederate general up because they think they were Nazis, I think the Confederate generals would be protesting.
Right.
Of course,
they weren't.
They weren't there at
that's
the
a
time,
different thing.
Right.
Of course. Well, and you're right. And you're referring to the fact that many of these the white groups, supremacist groups,
their symbols come from Germany.
Well,
right?
and there's just there's no way around it. These are uneducated, like that awful person that plowed his vehicle into the car. And you heard his high school professor talking about how he admired Nazi. If you're like that, you're disturbed and you're uneducated and you don't know what you're talking about, okay? Period. Let's take a break. When we come back, lots of phone calls as we continue our conversation right after this.
This is